presentation on burnout. I'm super excited to give this presentation today, so I'm hoping that you all enjoy it as well. And just want to get into it. So I'm going to go over what burnout is, what it could also be instead of burnout, the different levels of burnouts, and then how to recover from burnout. So then let's go. What is burnout? So burnout is a physiological and emotional and mental state of depletion. So that means that you're fatigued, not just on a mental level where you're feeling a little bit tired or brain foggy, but you're also physically reacting to this tiredness. And burnout is mostly linked to work-related stress or study-related stress. So anything you're doing vocationally, it's more about the environment on which you're conducting work. So if you take someone who has burnout and you take them away from work, usually the symptoms of burnout resolve because it's related to that environment in which you're working in. Symptoms of burnout include being irritable or thinking in a very cynical way where everything is quite negative. You can't think of anything very positive, and you're just in general quite grumpy. You can feel quite tired. You can feel like you don't really want to do things anymore, even if you really loved your work or your studies. It's just something off that you can't really explain when it comes to how you feel about your work or your study anymore. You might start noticing that the work that you put in doesn't go as far as it used to. You're starting to feel a bit inefficient. There can be a little bit of a helplessness in which you are unsure how to handle all of the tasks that you were handling before. And you can also have like this distance that starts occurring between you and the work that you're doing. So, burnout, contrary to popular belief, does not result from having a stressful or demanding job. So, when I say that, I mean we tend to think that you only experience burnout if you have too much work to do. But that's not the case necessarily. So, they've done a couple of studies and they've found that aside from workload, there were a bunch of other things that contribute to burnout. And one of the biggest things is work satisfaction. Does the work that you do actually make you feel satisfied? If you're doing work that doesn't make you feel very good inside, then that can really be the biggest contributor to burnout. But aside from that, it can also be the environment around you. Are you getting enough feedback from your superiors or your peers? Are you in an environment where people are very negative or positive? So those are certain things in the environment around you. And I've listed some things here. So like work satisfaction, the stress of the workload. Is it too much? Is it actually not enough, actually? Are you getting recognition for the work that you're doing? Did someone like just say, hey, you're doing a good job every now and again? It's really nice to have that feedback. Do you have enough support? If you are unwell and you're not coping, does someone there to help you or guide you in your workplace? So I've listed here the workplace environment, and that is really important. If you have things that are physiologically stressful, like fluorescent lighting, for example, that can have add to your stress level on an unconscious level. So wearing uncomfortable clothing, having not enough food during the day, all the small things that impact on yourself physiologically can actually really take a toll on you mentally. Now, I put here the amount of overtime. Sometimes it's okay to work long hours, but if you're doing this consistently, then you're not having enough time to look after yourself in other aspects. Again, we go back to hunger, to sleep. What are you sacrificing to give more time to your work? It's very important when it comes to taking overtime that you're aware that at some point your body physically cannot handle extra hours. And the last one here I have is perfectionism. A lot of people have expectations of themselves that are very high. And if you find yourself that you're quite perfectionistic, the demand that you place on yourself can be a lot higher than what the demand actually is. And so you kind of create a dynamic in yourself that leads into burnout because you're trying to cope with the expectations that come from this idea of perfectionism. Okay, so I've got here a stress curve. So most things in life, want to survive, they actually need a little bit of stress. You need to have a deadline at the end of the month in order to make sure that you actually get something done. So if you have not enough stress, then you can be bored or you find yourself being tired because there's just nothing stimulating you. So that's on the lower end here where it says too little stress, underload. And then as you get up the curve, you are in your optimum stress zone. So keep you motivated, but not too much stress that you start getting tired. And now you get to the point where you start experiencing fatigue. So we're going up that middle line there. When you're on that borderline, you can either take a step back and go, okay, this is maybe getting a bit too much, and go back into like letting some things slide or rescheduling something to next week. Dealing with fatigue, you kind of know when you're at that level of being able to say, okay, this is maybe too much, this is maybe too little, and you can make it go better. All right. But then we start going into exhaustion. You've got too much physiological stress. Let's say you haven't eaten properly, you haven't slept properly. Oh dear. My sides, give me a second. I have no idea what happened there, but I'll get back to it. Is it still showing them? Okay, thank you. Okay, so there's too much stress going on. Even my laptop got stressed out there at the thought of that. um, so we start taking on too much, and that's when you start leading into exhaustion. At this point, an overload is not quite burnout. You're feeling exhausted, but if you take like a week off of work or a couple days to reset your mind, you can go back into the optimum stress zone, no problem. But now, what happens when this too much stress goes on for too long? So it doesn't have to be that long of a period. It can, and honestly, burnout can happen very quickly over the span of a month. All of a sudden, you're in burnout, or even a couple of weeks. So once you're in this exhaustion stage, it's really important to pay attention to your body and your mindset. See how to check in with yourself. Now and then we start going into burnout. This is when you have a lot of emotions that come in. Like first you start feeling anxious, or maybe you start really disengaging from your work. If you keep the load on yourself physiologically, eventually you get into breakdown. If you keep the same amount of stress on your body, you do nothing else, and you just think that you can push through it, that's not what happens when it comes to burnout. If you're in burnout, you can't push through it. At the end of it, you will end up in a breakdown. So you got to be really careful when you get into that red zone, because that's like the danger level right here. Okay, so what does burnout look like? So I've got here an inside perspective, how you feel on the inside, and I have an outside perspective of how other people can perceive you, because sometimes I feel like what we're feeling inside, we don't convey very well outside. And so if you have a friend or a coworker and you see from the outside perspective what's going on, maybe it can help you to help them get the support they need when they're experiencing burnout. So on the inside, you'll have a change in your habits, in the workplace, in your study place. Maybe you used to get up early every morning to be the first one in the lecture hall. Now you don't care if you're running 10 minutes late. You're taking longer to complete work or to get through a chapter when you're studying. So you'll sit down, and what used to take you half an hour is now taking you 3 hours, and you have no idea why. Mentally, you're just kind of exhausted and not keeping up anymore. And then there's struggling with deadlines. So you have all this stress, and then you kind of respond to the stress by procrastinating, or you put too much detail into your work. Either way, you're kind of struggling to keep afloat of all the work that you have in front of you. Then you also have difficulty with sleeping at night. Maybe you have insomnia, or you are not feeling hungry anymore, or you're excessively hungry all the time. Like that's kind of a usual stress response you have. When you start going into burnout, you're activated and you're feeling quite stressed out. And then you can also start feeling isolated. I picture from coworkers, but it can be from anyone in the workplace. So maybe a lecturer that you used to really love, you don't anymore, or maybe you're not communicating so well with your supervisors anymore. So that feeling of isolation really comes in here when you're handling something so stressful. You kind of pull away from being social. Now, from the outside perspective, people can see these and interpret them quite negatively. So they'll look at you and like, oh, you're quite tardy. You're not coming in on time anymore. You're quite flaky. You make plans with me, but then you don't show up. Being uninvested, uninterested. You don't want to do the work anymore is what it looks like from the outside. From the inside, you want to get the work done, but you're having trouble with it. But from the outside, you might be like, why is this person just not contributing like they used to? And then the overall appearance, they can look very stressed. I think you know what a stressed person looks like. Or maybe they might not look stressed, but maybe they look like they haven't had enough sleep, or they aren't putting themselves like they're not dressing like they used to, for example. And then you can kind of see, okay, maybe something's going on there. So what's important to note is that burnout has a lot of similarities to different disorders as well as physiological states. So when you see this profile from the outside perspective, keep in mind that it might not just be burnout. In any case, I do recommend that you just reach out to support someone who looks like they're not handling things so well. We never know what someone else is going through. And if you notice any of these in yourself, it's so important to give yourself self-care. But I'll go to the next slide and then I'll discuss what to do when you're not sure if it's burnout or not. Okay, so what else could it be? So another thing with burnout is compassion fatigue. Now, what separates compassion fatigue from burnout is that burnout is purely to do with your work environment and what work you're actually doing. Whereas compassion fatigue is if you are a very helpful person and you really like to listen to someone else and what they're going through, and eventually you get to a point where you've helped so many people that you haven't had time for yourself anymore. And that can lead to compassion fatigue. So the more you hear about someone else's stress, you're taking on their stress as your own, and that can lead to the same symptoms as burnout. But what you have to do for compassion fatigue is quite different from what you have to do for burnout. So maybe I'll do another presentation on compassion fatigue, but at this point, just know that listening to people and their struggles, helping someone else out all the time can lead to something very similar to burnout. So depression shares a lot of similarities with burnout. The main difference between depression and burnout is that depression doesn't go away when you take the work environment away. If you take a 2-week vacation and you start to feel relaxed and that everything's a lot easier, then you know for sure it's burnout. But if you have those persistent feelings, even when you're not thinking about work, when you're not in a work setting, then it's really an indication that you have depression. Burnout, when it's severe stages, can lead to depression, but most of the time they are quite different problems to deal with. And for depression, I really would recommend that you work with a healthcare professional. So whether it's a psychologist, a psychiatrist, or someone who is specialized in this area, I would really recommend that if you notice that this is a continuous feeling, not just in the workplace, but in other aspects of your life. And the last one, I think it's really important to note that your physical health has a very profound effect on your mental and emotional health. And I find that this is often neglected when we talk about topics that are very psychological. We don't really go into, okay, what is the physiological profile of someone when we take them to therapy, but I think it's important to address. So If you are feeling a bit on edge and you know that your workload has been fine, you still have the same feelings towards your coworkers, but you're struggling out of nowhere, I think it would be a good idea to see your general practitioner and to have a look maybe at your blood work to see if there's any deficiencies or problems, because there are a lot of healthcare problems that can occur that you don't really know that it's occurring until you have the physical, emotional, well, the emotional and mental side of it. So another thing is like chronic fatigue. I think if you've had COVID not too long ago and you've had long COVID, then you really understand how similar it can be to burnout. But again, with that, it occurs outside the workplace as well. So just to take note of all these things before you say that you have burnout, just make sure that you're healthy and you're not going in the wrong direction. Okay. So now I want to get to the levels of burnout. So I know that this table starts at 5, but we're going to start at 1. So you'll notice a little bit that you're not getting as far as you used to with your work. And that leads to you taking less breaks. So what used to take you half an hour and you could take a 15-minute break, now you're taking an hour, and then you start feeling anxious about taking that 15-minute break because you still haven't gotten through the work you used to get through. So you're feeling a little bit of the edge of anxiety here. You're noticing that things are not as going as well as they used to. But the main thing is that you don't feel that you have as much energy to do things as before. So now we go into stage 2. So now, because your workload starts piling up, you're taking longer to do it, you're starting to lose focus, you don't remember what you were working on, and now the hours that you're spending doing something are just getting longer and longer and longer. Okay. Then if we go from that situation into the third level, now we start feeling a lot of the negative emotions. So now you're feeling frustrated. You've done all this work, it's not amounting to much. You're not seeing the results you want to see. You're getting maybe a bit resentful of the people around you. You feel a lot of guilt for not coping as well as you used to. You're struggling to sleep. So at this stage, like I would say that this is in the medium zone where you can still get out of it, but it's going to take a lot longer than in the first 2 stages here. So in the final like 2 stages, this is like where you're going to really have to change things a lot when you want to come out of burnout. So at level 4, now you're starting to feel completely checked out. You weren't seeing results. Now why do you care? You're exhausted. You've tried your best, you've done everything, you've worked all those hours, now you just can't care anymore. You're so tired, you're not motivated, you're not happy anymore. You're just exhausted. And then we get into level 5. From feeling exhausted, now you've just lost all of hope, you're withdrawn, you're detached, and again, you can actually start having a physiological response to this. You can get ill very quickly, and then you can even lead into depression. And at level 5, you can have a complete breakdown. So like having a breakdown in the workplace, maybe you start having emotional outbursts, crying or getting angry, or doing things that are not so appropriate, but you just don't feel like you have much control anymore. Or you just end up not showing up to work because it's just too much on your mind. Like at this stage, at stage 5, it's like the biggest danger zone there is when it comes to burnout. And it's just so difficult to get out of that place. So it's important to address burnout early on. Like the early on solutions are a lot easier than the long-term solutions for a heavy burnout. So when you start noticing that things are not going well, I think it's just important to address it there. And now I think I'm going to go from here into what we can do with dealing with burnout. Okay, so in the initial stages, the green stages that I had there, oh, is it yellow? Sorry. taking a short vacation can really help. So you're feeling a little bit tired, you're not getting as far as you used to. If you have a short break from your work, it can reset everything, and then when you come back, you have fresh eyes to look at everything, and you're like, oh, okay, I can do this now. You've had a bit of a rest, you've had a bit of a break, and now going back into it, you can actually cope with it quite fine. Once you start going into the more intermediate levels, so here when we're at level 3, a vacation maybe might not help as much, because you're gonna go away, you're gonna come back, but you have this workload that's still over your head the whole time. So it's not really gonna ease anything, because when you hit burnout and you're not performing as well as you used to, you're gonna end up with a lot of backlog before going on vacation. At that point, you really need to sit down and discuss with people around you to try and help you make the workplace more suitable to address the burnout. If you get into stage 4 and 5, this is going to need a much deeper change. And when I say that, I don't mean just maybe taking new courses. You actually might need to think about what it is you actually want to do in life, where you want to be, how you want to go about doing things. The changes you need to make are quite fundamental. You might even need to change the job that you're working at. If you reach a total collapse where you've reached that breakdown stage, I've seen people and they've needed months to years of a complete absence of work. So, like, they've had to go from a position where they were working full time to now working part time because the burnout has been so severe. Now, most people, I don't think, reach that final stage of burnout, but it is important to note that if you ever hit that point of complete breakdown, you actually will have to stop working for quite a while before your body can reset. It's quite a very difficult thing to deal with, especially if you feel all this pressure to perform. Telling someone to take a step back is very, very difficult. Even the smallest steps back are quite difficult, but I feel it's important to note that you don't want to continue the cycle of burnout. I know that making changes are difficult. I know that it's very hard to get on the track that you want to be, and you are so tempted to keep pushing and pushing and pushing when it comes to getting the work done. But I want you just to be aware that you can only push yourself so far. So, be kind to yourself, everyone. Okay, so taking a break from work. So I think a lot of people think I'm going to take a month off, and then when I come back, everything will be fine. That's not true. The longer you stay away from work, the more the backlog builds up, the more you have to do when you get thrown back into it, and maybe you actually have a lot of resistance to going back after you've been away for so long. You don't even need to take that long of a vacation in the early stages of burnout. In fact, just taking a couple 3-day weekends is a lot more beneficial than taking like a month off. So if you prioritize some off time, you can see what works best for you. For most people, they only need a 7 to 8 day vacation when it comes to feeling like at level 3 or so. And then it really resolves. Then the other part of this, when you are on vacation or you are away from work, learning to not check your email can be really difficult, or not check your phone. There's like some temptation when you're on vacation to check in. How is everyone at work doing? Or how's everyone at university doing? You need to actually just turn it off. Don't look at it. Say, I'm on vacation right now. I'm going to just compartmentalize and be like, this is vacation mode. So when you're away from work, don't take work with you. That's just the important thing when it comes to burnout. The other part of this is you need to have an identity outside of work or your study. No job can be there forever, as much as sometimes I would like it to be that I can be doing the same thing every day. life changes, things are gonna change. So you need to have something where you can form an identity around, or have a hobby that you really enjoy, not just for, um, well, here I have identity purposes, but also it really helps you to relax and take your mind off of work. And it doesn't have to be something extreme or big. I mean, I have someone who likes to drum. You can play an instrument, you can play a game, you can read a book, you can. There's so many different ways of having a hobby. You don't need to be fully invested into something. It's just something that you like to do on the side, and explore what you like doing. Maybe you like walking but haven't been in a while. Maybe you enjoy something more challenging. Maybe you want to go bungee jumping. Make a plan to do the things that you really enjoy outside of work, so that you can have something that you can switch off and do and enjoy, and take that stress off of yourself. All right, so this is really for stage 3 and beyond. I think when it break down, we'll have another solution. But for this, when you need to think about your workplace, it needs to support you. So you need to make sure you have people that can help you. If you're not hitting a deadline and you are living in fear, maybe you should reach out to your professor, whoever set the assignment, and ask them, can you please give me an extension? Can you give me some extra support? Can get a friend to maybe look at what you're doing and give input or advice. And then the next point is creating a safe and happy space. Not every environment is safe and happy, but you need to find a place where you can be safe and happy. If you have a study area in the library and it's a cozy corner, and then that's your safe and happy space because it's quiet and that's where you mainly go, that's great. If you are studying at home, maybe you can make your bedroom your safe, happy space to work in. If you're working in an office environment, maybe you can bring things to put on your desk in the office to make you remind yourself what makes you happy. I know that it's typical people to have pictures of family, but you can put a picture of your dog. It doesn't matter what you have on your desk. It's just there to remind you that there is a safe space around you. It doesn't have to be a big space, but just make it safe and happy for you in any way that you can. So small little adjustments. I know someone that loved to keep flowers on her desk. It doesn't have to be very big. The next point here, delegating and refocusing. Like, let's say you're working on a group project and you've decided you want to take the lion's share of the work. At that point, you need to recognize in yourself that this work is too much and it's just not worth it at the end because it's a shared grade. So at that point, you can actually give tasks to someone else to do. Or maybe you're doing something in the group project that is not your strong suit. So let's say we're doing a presentation on lions, and you decided to do the research part, but that's taking a lot of energy, and it would be better if you just did the speaking part. Then you can rearrange with your group and ask them if you can do the speaking part instead. Sometimes you just need to see where is your actual strong suit. I know a lot of people, when it comes to studying in particular, they hear from their professors that they need to write everything down from their lectures 3 times for them to learn it. Maybe that's just not how you can learn well. I know that when I did writing out, that I just started spacing after 5 minutes and I don't even remember what I wrote down. So what I had to do was I spoke to my dad. I got him down and I taught him lessons. You got to find a way of doing the work or studying in a way that really works with you, because fighting against yourself is going to really contribute to the stress load that you're carrying. So yeah, like, you got to just find what you are strong in, and then if you are in a weak point, you got to figure out how you're going to address this. You don't have to address your weaknesses alone. You can get help and support on that. There are so many different ways to get support. You just got to think a little bit out the box sometimes. And not everything is a weakness. If you find yourself that you are quite perfectionistic and you want to perform, you don't have to see it as big stressor that's going to cause you burnout, you can look at the positive sides to that and go, okay, this perfectionism leads me to create the best single thing that I'm working on. So maybe working on multiple things at the same time is not a good idea. So it's all about just thinking about what you're really good at doing, because at the end of the day, like, what's going to carry you most is where you have the most positive emotions attached to. So if you're really happy doing one thing, leaning into that can really help bring and balance to the stress load that you're carrying. And then task prioritization. This one's a little difficult because I think a lot of people approach tasks a bit differently, but I think we're all aware of how easy something is versus something else. So if something you know is going to take longer, don't leave it to last minute. Try and put it first and do little bits at a time. Break it down into steps if you have to, and then do something else in the same day that you find enjoyable. So if you have a bunch of different projects, you enjoy writing essays, you can do a little bit of work on your essay and a little bit of work on the difficult thing that you don't like. You don't have to just do all the heavy, difficult stuff that you don't like all the time. That's really not how you should be spending your time. You should be doing some things that you find enjoyable, but also doing some of the things that you find a bit more challenging, just to balance it out. Okay, and then now it's time for a little bit of self-reflection. I'm going to be a little bit more quiet and slow for this section. So if you are experiencing burnout, I really want you to think of the things that brought you to this place. Do you feel that it has to do with your performance? Do you need to keep doing more and more and more, and it's taking longer to get things done because you just have all this need to get things done? Um, is it maybe external pressure? Do you have someone telling you completely unreasonable deadlines? Or maybe you're comparing yourself to a peer and they're doing better than you, and so now you have this feeling of pressure coming from someone else. All right. Or is it perfectionism? You feel that you need to perform at a certain level that you know is not maybe realistic? Or are you feeling a little too passionate? I know this is a strange one, but maybe you just have so much passion and drive that you want to get so many things done at the same time that you're not aware of how it's impacting on you physically, emotionally, mentally. Okay, I'm going to just let you think for a little bit, and then I'm going to move on. Okay. All right. Now, next part of self-reflection. So, what in the workplace impacts on your ability to work? Is it a very disruptive environment? Is it very loud, noisy? Maybe you have your phone going on every 5 minutes with a notification. What are things that are disruptive to you? Do you have a bad relationship with your peers or your lecturer or your supervisor? Is someone always angry or negative? Is the workload maybe too much or too little? Or maybe it's things you really don't like doing? And what is the environment stressful to you? Are the lights too bright? Are you not in clothing that makes you feel comfortable? Do you not have adequate breaks? Do you, have enough access to food? Things like that. And then, are your work hours okay? Are you doing too much overtime? All right. Thank you very much for everyone. Um, I'm glad that you all attended. I'm so happy and excited to have given this presentation. I'm so sorry if I went through it very quickly. Yeah, I just really hope that this was informative for you all.